Hi everyone, it's Dr. Goel from Peak Human Labs, and today I have a very special guest, Dr. Steph from fatty15.com. She's a world-beating researcher all in the field of C15 fatty acids, and you'll be learning all about the health benefits of this remarkable supplement. So stay tuned and we'll see you on the other side. Hi, Dr. Steph. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Sanjeev. It's wonderful to be here.
So I understand you have a lot going on. It's a lot of things happening in the Fatty 15 world, I understand.
Yeah, it's very exciting times. It's good to, let the science lead the way. It's kind of the take-home message. So we just had a big paper come out a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow. I want to chat about that for sure. So maybe before we get into that, I'd love to hear just if you can let the viewers know a little bit about yourself. Like just tell us where you came from, how you got to being a researcher in this space and creation of this product, which we're going to talk about. If you could just take us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a veterinary epidemiologist by training, and I was working for the World Health Organization and the CDC when about 20 years ago, I was invited unexpectedly by the Navy to help lead a clinical research program to continually improve the health and welfare of Navy dolphins, which is
Oh,
kind of funny because as
right.
people are starting to learn to know, it's like, I don't even know how to swim. And here I was working on the Navy with dolphins. But importantly, the Navy's, taking care of this population of 100 bottlenose, sustained population of 100 bottlenose dolphins for over 60 years. They live a long time. We learned that older Navy dolphins, some age better than others. And really interesting, Sanjeev, is that we found that some dolphins, but not all, age a lot like us. They get chronic inflammation, high cholesterol, fatty liver disease, even the full suite of changes consistent with Alzheimer's disease.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, it's fascinating. So all of a sudden we
Is
have this
that related to lifestyle changes too? Like lifestyle, like there's some dolphins who are not doing like the same lifestyle as others? It's like, or is there?
Yeah, that was the big question, right? It was just like, okay, why these dolphins live in the same environment? They get the same health care.
Yeah.
Why are there? Usually we just blame like, does that person exercise or not, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're asking the right questions. And so what has been so insightful about this population for discoveries for healthy aging is that they are so well controlled. They do swim and exercise. There isn't obesity. They're not eating trans fatty, ultra processed foods. So it really provides a really clean slate to understand specifically which small molecules, all they eat are fish, but they do eat different types of fish. So we're able to use metabolomics to look at which small molecules present in their fish as well as in their bodies predicted the healthiest aging dolphins. We thought it would be omega-3s. To be honest, we were biased in our investigation. But luckily, the panel we used was broad. It included over 450 different small molecules. And that's where we found unexpectedly C15 pentadecanoic acid, this odd chain saturated fat in their diet predicted the healthiest aging dolphins. From there, we moved C15 into the lab. We did 8 studies over 3 years on pure C15. And that's where we published in scientific reports back in 2020 that C15 was not just an active and beneficial saturated fat, but that it was meeting these rare criteria of being an essential fatty acid, which means our bodies have to have certain levels of it just for us to stay baseline healthy. And if we don't get enough in our diet because our bodies don't make enough of it, then our health actually falls apart. So I very unexpectedly and quickly went from being a veterinarian to a veterinary epidemiologist, chasing down diseases for humans, to a dolphin veterinarian, to helping bring this groundbreaking, discovery to truly improve global health.
Okay, wow. I have a lot of questions that I want to unpack here. Okay, so you said that it's an essential fatty acid. So I want to ask, where is it found in our food right now?
Right. So for essential fatty acids, for us, the dolphins clearly were getting it from certain types of fish. It ends up not all fish have C15 in them. And so it was the dolphins that were eating the fish that had the highest amount of C15. That's how they were preserving their long-term health. For us, our primary source of C15 is whole dairy fat. And
Oh,
this goes against everything we were taught, right? And so
yeah,
since 1977, for the past 50 years, we've been actively told to decrease our intake of all saturated fats,
that's right.
specifically by eating less, avoiding whole fat milk, avoiding butter. And it ends up that there are two types of saturated fatty acids, even chain saturated fats like C16 and C18, which are pro-inflammatory, and they do continue to be associated with the poor health we're used to hearing.
Yeah.
But then there are these trace odd chain saturated fats, specifically C15, that is the opposite. It has beneficial properties. And again, like I mentioned, anti-inflammatory, and we'll talk about all the different properties, but essential to maintaining our health. So we threw out the baby with the bathwater on the human side by really saying avoid all saturated fats. So its essentiality is really was revealed in part because we went through a 50-year experiment of taking it out of our lives. And the same thing we saw in dolphins with higher C15 have a lower risk of diseases. Same is held true for people. There are now meta-analyses, studies showing that people with higher C15 have a lower risk of having type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and fatty
Oh,
liver
wow.
disease.
Okay, so how does one know what their level is? Is this a test that's available?
It is. So it's not your typical test for as a physician, right? That has been available, but savvy folks like yourself, tend to dive deeper and there are fatty acid panels
Yes.
that have been used, right, for what, and not all fatty acid panels include C15. So you want to check and make sure that it does if they're using a fatty acid panel. But if it has C15 in it, then not only can you get it, but you might actually be sitting on a bunch of C15 data today. Genova Diagnostics will actually just be announcing next week. They have it not only in their fatty acid panel and their Nutra-Eval panel,
Yes.
but they're coming out with an at-home C15 test
Oh.
that patients can use to measure their C15 levels.
So there's only one C15. There's not multiple versions of C15. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So it has a super anti-inflammatory effect, is what you're saying. And I understand it's called fatty 15, I think primarily because of fatty liver.
That's right.
So what's the connection there? Like, I can understand the anti-inflammatory aspect. One would say, okay, well, it's anti-arthritic, or maybe, some other aspect that inflammation is assessing. But how did you get to the fatty liver part?
Yeah, that one goes back to the dolphins
Right.
too. So dolphins were developing fatty liver disease, which was really curious, right? We were seeing as patients, we were seeing chronic elevations in liver enzymes that were
Okay.
phasic, right? And so I should say chronic but phasic. So they would kind of come and go. Mainly it was detected on just doing a routine blood work, and often like with human patients. And when we dug in and we looked at histological slides, that's where we started realizing they have fatty liver disease that looks identical to that in humans.
Mhm.
So when we were looking at what was a risk factor for fatty liver disease in dolphins, clearly it wasn't sugar. And that's where, in part, the higher C15 showed dolphins that had a lower risk of fatty liver disease. So what we now know is that C15 plays a central role in primarily in the progression of fatty liver disease to non-alcoholic steatohepatitis or NASH. And I'll walk you through the process.
Yes, please.
It's part of what's called the cellular fragility syndrome, which is what we
Okay.
just published. It's a C15 deficiency syndrome, the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years, right? Like vitamin C and scurvy and
Oh,
vitamin D
wow.
and
Okay. Right.
we
Nutritional
just published
deficiency.
that. Yeah, we'll make sure that you're able to share that out. And so we just published that in Metabolites 2 weeks ago, and pathophysiology goes as follows. So our cell membranes, our cells have cell membranes that are lipid bilayer, right? And within that lipid bilayer are fatty acids. And the integrity of our cells and our cell membrane is completely dictated by how sturdy the fatty acids within those cell membranes are. So
Okay.
polyunsaturated fatty acids, any unsaturated fats, are actually fragile cells in the cell membrane. C15 has arisen not only as an anti-inflammatory molecule, but perhaps more importantly, it is a stable fatty acid that actually serves to armor up and make our cells more resilient against premature breakdown. We now know that we need a minimum of 0.2% of the fatty acids in our cell membrane needs to be C15. And if it goes below that level, it's like a threshold effect. If we have below that amount in our cell membranes, our cells fall apart, they become too fragile, and they become susceptible to lipid peroxidation. If we get above that amount, our cells are stable. We saw this in the dolphins. We've seen this in appropriate animal models and supportive evidence in humans. Now, while we were coming to understand that, in 2012, Columbia University scientists made this fascinating discovery, Sanjeev, where they found that there was an entirely new way that our cells were dying, and it's called ferroptosis. So we all learned our cells die by, autophagy, necrosis, and
Sure.
apoptosis.
Yes.
They found this fourth, right, a whole new way, a fourth way that our cells are dying called ferroptosis.
Say that again. What's the word? Can you just say it? Proptosis?
In fact, I'll spell it because
Yeah.
it's such a new word for all of us, right? So ferroptosis.
Oh, ferroptosis.
Yeah, Ferroptosis.
Yes, yes.
Ferro with iron, right? And so since that discovery was made about ferroptosis, there have been over 10,000 peer-reviewed papers on ferroptosis, yet nobody has been able to figure out why did our cells start dying in this way, and what's causing it. So in our paper, what we show, we provide the evidence that it's actually C15 deficiencies that are causing ferroptosis. And as we started taking C15 out of our diets, our cell membranes started to become more fragile. That created ferroptosis. So that gets us back to your original questions, where cells become fragile. Ferroptosis is when our cells have literally fragile cell membranes, and then there's iron present in the cell. The lipid peroxidation from those fragile cell membranes combined with iron, it leads to this massive production of reactive oxygen species that then take out our mitochondria. So that's how ferroptosis works. What we're able to figure out from the dolphin and our C15 deficiency studies is that when we don't have enough C15, our cells become fragile. That results in all these downstream of lipid peroxidation. The cells that become fragile include red blood cells. So when our red blood cells become fragile, the macrophages in our liver, here's where the liver comes in, macrophages from our liver then engulf weak red blood cells. If we have a lot of weak red blood cells, then it's engulfing all these weak red blood cells. What's left behind is iron. So the corpses of those red blood cells leaves behind iron. This leads to iron deposition in the liver that then combines with lipid peroxidosis. And this is lipid peroxidation and ferroptosis. And all of the downstream things from there, including non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, spillover, dysmetabolic iron overload syndrome, all of these things that we're seeing in increased amounts, especially in younger people, younger being people younger than 50, increased risk of heart disease, of fatty liver disease, advanced fatty liver disease, and type 2 diabetes. It's all connected to accelerated aging coming from these fragile cells and resulting in all this downstream, kind of a mess.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the C15 really helps to prevent the progression from fatty liver to NASH, right? Is that correct? So it's not in effect removing the fatty liver. That people need to do in other ways. And is that correct? What my understanding?
Yeah, that's what the studies support. Jeff Schwimmer, who is a pediatric gastroenterologist, he's a leader in pediatric NAFLD. He did a study and he showed that kids who have higher C15 have less fat in their liver. So there may be a driver.
Another mechanism, right?
Yeah, but I don't know the mechanism that's driving that. What we do have is very clear is that there is a subset of people with NAFLD in which it is well established that if that iron deposition is present, if there's hyperferritinemia, right, not attributed to acute phase inflammatory response, if it's truly iron overload, that really becomes the match that lights off this whole fire of, how we get from a NAFLD to a NASH.
So it really feels like, yeah, the ferritin, I mean, the iron is another culprit here. Like when we talk about, the dangers about taking iron overload, and it sounds like this is how it happens.
Yeah, that's right. And
in
it's
susceptible
fascinating
people.
because, yeah, exactly that. We saw this. It's for the dog, for humans, there's so many different phenotypes, so many different risk factors, like you're saying, lifestyle factors. The dolphins were a really clean model in which they only get one phenotype of this. And so it was clear as day when we're looking at it of what was causing it. And so we were able to repeat that in the lab and say like, oh my gosh, it all gets down to fragile cell membranes. So it's now figuring out, in our patients and your patients, because you have human patients, which people have low C15, so is that less than 0.2%, have fragile red blood cells, have fragile cells, and then being able to, monitor them for those downstream complications of hyperferritinemia, evidence of, NAFLD going to NASH. Even when it spills over that iron overload, it then goes and hits the heart. People with NAFLD are more likely to die from heart disease than from liver disease. And a lot of this is a spillover, believed to be the spillover effect.
Okay. And is there genetic predispositions that are, for different people? Do we know that? Like that, maybe influence the production of C15 or absorption from C15 from the diet?
It's a great question. I mean, everything, forgive the pun, if everything in my gut says that yes. There's one study that was done, a GWAS study, that looked at gene variation based upon C15 levels, and they didn't find any differences. So it means that there's no overt genetic change that dictates black or white what your C15 levels are. But I don't think that excludes, Sanjeev, what you were just saying, right? That we do know that, for example, in an upcoming study that's about a clinical trial with fatty 15 that's about to be published, that fatty 15, is proven to increase C15 levels for every 100 milligrams of fatty 15. Your blood levels go up by about 0.1%. So that proved out. We've seen that from prior pharmacokinetic studies, but it was repeated here. But there was variation. There were people who said they took fatty 15. These were 18 to 24-year-olds. So I don't mean to be biased, but there were some adherence issues. But even controlling for the adherence, there did seem to be some that maybe didn't absorb C15 as well as others. So that may be a factor, may provide some variability. As we get older, our C15 levels naturally go down, even if we keep the same diet. So that is telling us something else is happening. We know that there are at least two types of microbes in the gut that help produce C15. So if those microbes aren't in optimal, so there are absolutely levers that in which individuals may have variation of their C15.
I take the C15, fatty 15 myself. It's one very small pill every day. So I'm just surprised that such a small pill can have such an impact. Right. Sometimes it's unbelievable that could. So you're saying just that amount can really shift the body's percentage on those cell membranes? And you said by how much and after how many months?
So it's pretty quick. So by 100 milligrams of that small pill that you talked about increases our blood levels depending upon the unit. So by 0.1% or by 1 microgram per mil, depending upon what test you're using. And all it takes, and again, because this C15 deficiency syndrome, it really is a threshold that if we can get up and above it, we really only need a set amount. There's some evidence based on a variety of studies, and then looking at like the Sardinian, longevity zone folks, that they have C15 levels that are 0.6.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which are 3 times higher. On average, we're all sitting on about 0.2 without intervention. And so there are some encouraging studies, some heart studies, long-term heart studies showing that if you have between 0.4 to 0.6, lower risk of developing heart disease. But right now we're focused on, let's just get you up and over to not be deficient and not have cellular fragility syndrome. So get above that 0.2%. And yes, it was just a tiny bit. If you look at milk fat, there are over 400 fatty acids in milk fat, and only 1% of all of those fats in milk fat is C15. So our body was really made to use that, make really good use. It's a very potent molecule for us.
Mm-hmm. I suspect that the breast milk must be very rich in this. Or is there any research looking at this?
It's a amazing question. So yeah, so if it's an essential fatty acid, essential nutrient, it would be hard pressed to say something's essential for all life, right? If it's not present in breast milk,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's the perfect food, right? For all baby mammals. Yes, it's present in breast milk. Interestingly, so there's been a whole series of studies done on this. And interestingly, what they've shown is that if mom is C15 deficient because she's not getting enough in her diet,
Yeah.
her breast milk has lower C15. So we see variation in studies have shown variation in mom in breast milk ranging from, like I said, that milk fat has 1%, right? C15, that in breast milk, it can vary from 0.2 to 3% based upon mom's C15 status.
Okay.
And just as importantly, showing that if mom has more C15, she gives baby more C15. And the higher C15 the baby has, the better and healthier its body growth. And there's a big study being done in France where they've been following children from third trimester, and they're now up to 6 years old, showing that at years 2, 3, and 6, that higher C15, better cognitive development.
Oh, wow.
Yet
Okay.
infant formulas have no C15 in it.
I was going to say that they're probably, I'm sure, asking you for if they can put something like that in. I assume that probably would be the next step for them.
Yeah, there's a whole, the groups that are doing these types of studies have actually, done have a call to action to try to get C15 into infant formulas because it's such an easy fix, and we're creating these C15 deficient generations, now from birth.
What are the unanswered questions? Like, what are the next thing? What are the things that you're researching now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one area, so we know a lot now. There's just a wealth of information at discoverc15.com. That's where all the peer-reviewed science on C15 is from all over the world. And you look at the areas and there's hardy evidence on metabolic type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular, specifically heart failure and coronary heart disease, of C15's ability to protect and even address components of these conditions, fatty liver disease, increasingly cancer. There's a whole separate group that's looking at C15's anti-cancer properties that works by, it's both an HDAC6 and a JAK-STAT inhibitor. And they have shown that it helps in vivo models, so not in people yet, that it helps to decrease the size of 6 different types of tumors, and it helps drugs like gemcitabine work better, and has even helped reverse tamoxifen resistance and tamoxifen resistant cancer cell lines. What's missing is the brain health component.
Right.
There's just a lack of, and I think it's just because that community hasn't been focusing on C15. So we have a study that'll be coming out later this year where we threw C15 against a bunch of different potential targets for Alzheimer's treatments. So, and showed some promise there unexpectedly. Every time we get the test back, every time we get tests back, Sanjeev, we're like, are you kidding me? Like, now C15 does that. So,
yeah, I feel like you may not want to name it fatty 15 anymore.
I know. I know. Now it's just like, well, it's still a fatty acid. So we can
that's okay. That's where it's coming from. Okay, it's not
we'll hold it that, and it'll
yeah, okay,
it's gone
sense.
so far beyond.
Yeah, it seems like it's just an essential fatty acid that has multiple metabolic effects.
Yeah, it's just going to have to be called. I don't know, it's we have customers who, when they describe fatty 15, they're like, it just fixes you where you're broken. And so from a cellular level, we see such broad effects, whether at the mechanistic level, because it is a pleiotropic molecule, no doubt. We know that it activates AMPK, inhibits mTOR, it activates PPAR alpha delta, and like I mentioned, it inhibits JAK-STAT and HDAC6. So it's because it's such a simple 15 chain carbon molecule, it is very effective at activating a lot of different receptors responsible for metabolic and immune and heart health. So it's really figuring out, it's just nature has done a good job. And when they say, well, nature's like, when I say essential, I mean essential.
How would you, have they done any studies looking at vegans? Like what type of levels do they have?
Right. So low. And this isn't based upon peer-reviewed scientific publications. This is based upon, members of our healthcare providers program, where they are looking back at their C15 levels of their patients and they're providing feedback to be like, oh my gosh, well, of course, my vegans have super low, reporting levels like at 0.04, 0.02, when it's supposed to be like 0.2 or greater. So it's wonderful to have the test to be able to help get, because obviously there are a lot of different foods that if you say, what foods have C15, you'll get a really long list. But in the end, it's super trace levels. And when it gets down to it, C15 reliably serves as a biomarker for how much dairy fat we eat. So above and beyond every other food, dairy fat is our primary source. So I think it's more like figuring out for vegans, how do we get, obviously with this, having the vegan supplement was part of that solution, but are there ways to get the microbiome tuned up so we can get more of those bacteria that produce, C15? If you eat more fiber, that inulin feeds bacterium that then makes C15. So as we get smarter about these mechanisms, we could do more to help vegans get their C15.
But the supplement, it should provide your requirement. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, exactly. And so it's like, how do we get you back up and then maintain those healthy levels? Yeah, it's not unlike a vitamin B12 where, it's hard for vegans to get the adequate amounts without supplementation.
Is there anything that people feel? I mean, some of these things I would suspect, and even for my patients, I kind of just tell them to take it because it seems like the science shows it, but I'm not sure if they necessarily feel anything. Or have you seen anything from patients? Like, what do they feel?
We do. I myself felt it, and
Okay.
from the beginning, and I honestly thought it was a placebo effect. I was like, there's just like, I'm not a big supplement taker until now. So obviously I take Fatty 15 every day,
Yeah.
but I was sleeping deeper, and all of a sudden I was sleeping through the night and calmer, and I was starting to get joint pain that comes with menopause, like tennis elbow without playing tennis. and it went away. All of my joint pain went away. I thought, well, maybe it's a coincidence, it's something else I'm doing, but we continued the science. This was in the early days, which early days is just 3 years ago. But we continued with the science, and there is a metabolite. So our bodies use C15 to make a metabolite called pentadecanoic carnitine, or PDC. And we then took this molecule, because we also saw it high in the healthy dolphins, and we tested it against a bunch of different drug targets. And we found that we published in scientific reports that it's the second ever discovered full acting endocannabinoid. So it fully activates both CB1 and CB2 receptors.
Oh, wow.
Which I'm like, oh,
okay.
Yeah, better sleep, less joint pain. So the big question is, we have reliably, since we launched in 2021, and now we've had over 100,000 people on Fatty 15, that reliably half of the people within 2 weeks report feeling better. And it's usually at least one of those three things: of better sleep, calmer mood, and less pain. So the question is, what about the other half? And it may be that some bodies are better at making the metabolite than others, or higher levels of they need to get to a certain level of C15 to get there.
One of the things I purchased some for my clients, my patients, is a little dog toy. And I'm a dog lover. We have a whole thing going on called Peak Canine, where we're like helping dog longevity. So it's very interesting. But I'm just curious about, are you also looking at Fatty 15 for dogs?
We are. I feel like you must have a microphone in our house. So
My dog loves that toy because it can't rip up anything. It can't rip it up, like it loves it.
Really?
It's
Really?
so
Okay,
like
that's good to hear.
it's
Yeah, we have a 6 pound Maltipoo, so she can't rip anything up. So she loves that. She loves it too. Right. So because, right, a lot of excitement now around companies like Loyal who are right. And so are looking for how do we extend longevity in our
yes.
dogs,
Yes.
primarily by making sure they're healthier longer.
Yeah.
And when we look at our aging dogs, right, then we're looking at, we know aging dogs, gray hair, cataracts, arthritis, their muscle mass goes down, their adipose levels go up, and they're at highest risk of heart disease and cancer. I mean, this is us, right? And so there's so many parallels between aging dolphins and aging humans, which,
Yeah.
as a veterinarian, I'm like, well, of course, and dolphins, right? So we're all mammals. So we all
Yeah.
end
Yeah.
up aging similarly. They just age faster than we do, the dogs. And we obviously know big dogs age faster than smaller dogs. So a lot of this excitement around longevity in dogs is looking into tapping into the longevity mammalian pathway, which is inhibiting mTOR, right, with rapamycin, and
Sure.
activating AMPK and decreasing IGF-1. That's what Loyal is going after to help keep their metabolism even, Steven, and help them live longer. So C15 does all of those things. We published this paper with Nick Shork, the head of NIH's Longevity Consortium, last year in Nutrients, and we put C15 head to head against rapamycin, metformin, and carbose.
Oh,
and yeah, and it showed that C15 had more clinically relevant cell-based benefits than any of the three of them, most closely mimicked rapamycin. Both rapamycin and C15 and fatty 15 are anti-inflammatory, anti-fibrotic, anti-cancer, antimicrobial, and antioxidant. So they have these, like, if you have that toolbox, in hand, you're going to stave off most causes of disease for as long as possible. So long story short is C15's benefits with regard to healthy aging and longevity in people roll right on over to what is expected to help with dogs. And that's where, but it's not a drug. It's something that we're all supposed to have. And we're learning that not all dog foods have C15. In fact, some dog foods have no C15 in it. Their ancestors, the wolves, eat meat and fat, and meat and fat will have C15 in it. And so it's have we gotten away? It's kind of the same story.
That could be, I wonder, an argument for raw food.
It could be. I mean, it could be an
know.
argument for raw food. I mean, we always want to be careful the bacterial side. So it depends on, like, our bigger dogs are better at handling, raw food than some of the smaller dogs that have been almost kind of like bred into a whole different domestic, breed. But it does make an argument that probably and undoubtedly the foods that we're feeding dogs have been moving away from their wild type diet, and their C15 levels are about the same as us, which indicates that which is the same as dolphins, indicates that they're going to have the same threshold, that same need for C15 in their lives, and more so increasingly as they get older. So stay tuned.
I love
we're hoping in another month or so we might be able to announce some products coming out with a wonderful partnership.
Okay, amazing. Okay, that sounds good. So where can people go? So you said discover15c15.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you go to discoverc15.com, that's where you can nerd out on all the science, because I know all of your listeners are
They will be.
right? You're all going to want to go there, and it can help you fall asleep because it's a whole lot of science. And for the product, you can go to fatty15.com. We have a healthcare providers, as you have kindly shared. You're part of it. Thank you so much. Healthcare providers program. And so you can also folks can just go to info@fatty15.com to reach out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for today. I really appreciated your time, and I'm just gonna go make sure I take my tablet and make sure my kids take it. I think is interesting. And I was thinking, so for dogs, like, do you think I just open the capsule and give it?
Yeah, it's how big is your dog?
Oh, 40 pounds.
It's a good sized dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that. It's funny because usually pills are hard to give to dogs.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I was saying. It's hard. Yeah.
Throw a pill his or her.
Is a as a her, yeah.
Just throw a capsule her way. Chances are she's just going to gobble it up.
Oh, okay. Okay. We'll do
Yeah,
that.
it's really funny. Like we're like all sudden, and so we have our whole fatty.
Mix it in with some yogurt.
Yeah, and you might need to do it, but all of our dogs, like in our Fatty 15 family, everyone's like, do you notice your dog just is like gets excited and thinks it's a treat? So, but for smaller dogs, like with our dog, we actually open up the capsule and I put like literally a tenth, like just about a tenth of a capsule, in a little thing of peanut butter.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Great. It's wonderful being here. It's a great conversation.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Dr. Steph from Fatty 15. Do check out the websites discoverc15.com as well as fatty15.com if you want to learn more. As well, I will put the email she provided in the links below. It was definitely really interesting. This supplement, C15, is really up and coming and it's taking really the medical health community by storm. I noticed this at the last conference I went. People were clamoring to hear more about how this supplement is having huge impacts on our metabolism, liver health, heart health, brain health, and so on. So I think it's definitely something to have a look at, and we'll talk to you later. Please, if you enjoyed today's episode, like and subscribe the channel.